to the Decahedron RPG podcast, hosted by Joe. Welcome to the Decahedron RPG podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, this is Joe. Just two things before we begin. The first thing is that this episode is dropping on Wednesday, March 6th. And that means you have just over a week to send in your entries for the giveaway for the fudge dice. What you have to do? Well, what you have to do is all towards the end of episode 113. So go back, listen to episode 113. That will tell you what you have to do. Right now, there's only 3 entries. That's Jason from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Daniel from the Bandit's Keep, and Merc the Meek from Merc the Meek. So if you are not one of those 3 people and you think you sent in an entry, you didn't. So go ahead, send me an entry and you might have a chance. Well, you will have a chance to win a set of fudge dice. Secondly, the episode that you are about to hear went long. I was recording with Daniel. We're doing a review. You'll hear about that in just a second. But, you know, Daniel's this really fun and easy guy to talk to, and time just flies when talking to him. So it went long, so I'm splitting this review into 2 episodes. So this is part 1. Next week will be part 2, and then the week after that will be the giveaway episode, hopefully with Dark Fluid, who won the last giveaway. So thanks for listening, and here is the first half of that episode. Hi, everyone. This is Joe, and today I am joined by Daniel. Daniel is the host of the Bandit's Keep podcast. He also has a YouTube channel, and he also has some products on drive-through, and he also has this thing, that neat little thing called Unchained, which is, I guess, kind of your take on OD&D with chainmail and not the alternative combat system.
Yep, that's pretty much what it is. Yep.
So links for all those things will be in the show notes. But today Daniel is here to join me to review a different product by a different company. This product is called Legends of the Ancient World. It's published by a company called Dark City Games, and it goes back to at least 2012. That's the oldest copy I have. But they revise it like almost every year, so I have several copies. It's designed by a man named George Drew. As I love, it is free, but not free as in copyright free or licensed. There's no license at all. It's a strict copyright. It's 8 pages, or maybe 7, depending on whether or not you count the cover. I'm going to do an asterisk because the version I'm reviewing is from 2019. They have a current version, 2024, 2023, and that one's down to 4 pages. Which version did you use for the review, Daniel?
So I had originally looked at the one that's current on the website, but then you sent me this one, so I figured so we're on the same page. I looked at 2019, and it was a while ago, and I looked at the other one, so I don't remember what the difference is, but it is shorter. They might have just taken the examples out, because I felt like the whole game was there.
There are some differences in the text, and I'll be covering some of them when we get to my bits. One of the neat things about the game is that it has a couple sister games, if you will. One is called Legends of Time and Space, which is pretty much the same rule set, but moved to science fiction. And then Legends of the Untamed West, which is just a Wild West version of the game. Same core mechanics for all of these, just, different tweaks here and there. For example, the Time and Space has starship rules. Ancient World has magic rules. Untamed West, I don't know. Wild West isn't really my thing. Maybe that'd be a Jason thing.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested. You said it to me. I haven't looked at it yet because I tend to mix up games if I look at too many at once. So I will take a look at it.
The big asterisk for this whole game is that it's not really intended for tabletop role-playing use. It's just I saw it, I'm like, this would make a great role-playing game. It's really made for choose-your-own-adventure type gameplay, but it's weird, and I've never seen a product like this. It's really made for a group choose-your-own-adventure type, programmed adventures, we'll call them. And so the rules are free to support their sale of the adventures that they sell. And they actually have a couple free ones on their website Links for everything will be in the show notes, of course. They have a GM, a game master player, but all he does is reads out the scenario and the choices, and then everyone at the table agrees which one they'll pick. And then if there's a combat, he adjudicates the combat according to the rules. Really close to role playing, I guess, but not quite. Question mark?
Yeah, I feel like I played with some dungeon masters like that, where they just read the module to you. No, I'm kidding, of course.
And overall, and the way I originally discovered it is when I was first getting into retro clones, not just D&D retro clones, but other types of retro clones. And this is really a light clone of Steve Jackson's The Fantasy Trip, Wizard and Melee and into Labyrinth, I guess. But at the time, there was no way to get The Fantasy Trip. The copyright was still owned by Metagaming, but they weren't publishing it anymore. And so I found this and I was like, hey, this is kind of a stripped down version of The Fantasy Trip. And that's kind of cool. So if you've never played The Fantasy Trip was like proto GURPS. When Steve Jackson left Metagaming, he tried to bring over The Fantasy Trip with him, but Metagaming said, nah, we're going to keep this one. So he was forced to kind of rewrite it, and that's what became GURPS. So when you look at this, you can say, oh, yeah, I see a lot of GURPS in there. So in this, characters have 3 stats. If you know GURPS, in GURPS it's 4 stats, but here it's 3: strength, dex, and intelligence. Well, IQ, they call it. If you've ever actually looked at The Fantasy Trip itself, the first book was Melee, which was just for fighters, and there's no IQ in that one. That was added later when they added wizards in Wizard. There's really 2 classes. They don't really have classes, but your character is treated differently if you can use magic versus if not. So it's a de facto class. It's mainly a skill-based system, and there's 40-ish skills. I will say I looked briefly at the other games today, and the number of skills differ. So like Legends of the Untamed West, there's only like 20 skills. But anyway, this isn't about this. This is about Legends of the Ancient World. In Legends of the Ancient World, there are 70-ish spells. And the basic mechanic, just like GURPS, is that you roll 3 dice and trying to get under or equal to the controlling attribute. And maybe if you have a skill in the task at hand, you might be able to add that to your stat, not to the roll, because that would make you fail. There's provisions to roll 4D for a tougher task. I did say in one place in the book, it talks about rolling 5D. And then it has this rule for contested checks, whereas in GURPS, you both roll and whoever makes it by the most wins. Here it's simpler. You both roll and whoever rolls higher, but still under your skill, wins. So it's almost like a Price is Right system, I guess. It has kind of a karma thing, but your normal karma, meta currency, luck points type thing. But it's only given out at certain points in the adventure books. There's no rule for when you would get them normally during gameplay. That's my overview. Did I miss anything, Daniel?
That seems pretty right on. And you hit on most of the likes and don't likes that I have.
Well, it's only 8 pages, so if you're going to summarize it, it's going to hit almost everything.
You explained the entire game, so yeah, that's funny.
Well, speaking of likes and dislikes, then let's get there. The way we do reviews here is I always invite a guest to get a second opinion. So it's not just mine all the time. And we talk about 3 things we like, 3 things we don't like, and then we give an overview thought. So as to the positives, what is your number 3 like?
Okay, and I am looking at this as a role-playing game because that's kind of how we're approaching
Yes, and that's how I'm approaching it as well.
So my number 1 is actually, and this is from the Fantasy Trip, is I like how your strength dictates what weapons you can use, and your armor affects like your dex, which affects your attack and also your movement. So I kind of like that. Like your gear interacts with you, and I really like that. I think it adds a little tactics to what you can do. And having played Melee, it's fun for that tactical part. Now, I'm the kind of, it's funny, this is a side story, as I always tell. When I first picked up Melee, I'd never played it before. I actually remember posting on Twitter, I was like, you probably could, if you just had a good standard like combat system, that's probably all you really need to have a role-playing game. And of course, people blasted me with telling me that wasn't true. But because I was thinking to myself, you could take Melee and just play it as a role-playing game. There's no reason why you can't. And obviously, it did develop into the Fantasy Trip. But it's like, you've got enough choices to make there. Do I want to carry a heavier weapon to do more damage? That means I need more strength, but then I can't put my points in dex, which is my speed and also my chance to hit. So I kind of like that. I like that balance.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that on a couple points because I had in my notes to talk about what the different attributes did, and I skipped that part. So I think you already covered them. Strength acts as your hit points and limits your weapon's choice, and it also acts as your spell points. It powers your spells if you're a wizard. Dexterity is your pretty much basic your skill for combat. And for most of the physical skills, it also determines how much you move. You said that part. And IQ is your basic throw for your mental tasks and it limits your spell choice. And it's funny that you said that when you first saw, I say melee, you have the more correct pronunciation, but I can't change who I am. Um, have you ever seen the fantasy trip, the entire product?
Yes, I bought the entire giant box set and never played anything beyond Malay because I didn't love the wizard part. I thought it was convoluted. It was a little much for me. So, but I think it's a cool system. But yeah, I haven't played the full thing. I do have it though.
Yeah, I guess we should have said this up front. So Melee was a micro game published by Metagaming, right? It's just meant to be a sit around the table and have these battles. And then they added Wizard to make it, add spells. And all Into the Labyrinth is it doesn't really add a whole lot of other rules. It's really a big book of GM advice.
One skills, right?
I think you're right. So yes. And the other thing I'm going to say is there's a lot of tunnels and trolls in this. And I think in my mind, the fantasy I've written in my mind, who knows how much reality works. Ken St. Andre wrote Tunnels and Trolls, and then Flying Buffalo printed it. And then he did a version for metagaming called Monsters. And that's pretty much just Tunnels and Trolls, but from the monsters' point of view. And that was edited by Steve Jackson. So I think Steve Jackson was a Tunnels and Trolls fan. And when you look at this, because you were talking about the way that strength dictates your weapons choices, that's straight out of Tunnels and Trolls. And strength powering the spells, that's straight out of Tunnels and Trolls. And so when I look at this, I see a lot of Tunnels and Trolls DNA. But for my number 3 positive, I'm going to go with character generation. It's fast, it's simple. Each stat starts at an 8. You have 8 more points that you can divvy up amongst them, which means you could have one stat at 16 and 2 at 8 if you wanted, or any other combination between, as long as the total doesn't exceed 32. It definitely gives you the impression that other races exist in this world, because when they talk about languages, they say, there's the Elven language and the Dwarven language, but there's no other mention of race, which makes me think that it handles races by not. And I like that. That just means if you want to be an elf, you just say, I'm an elf. And if you think that that means that you should have a higher dexterity, well, then you buy that higher dexterity with your normal points. I just like that. That concept has always appealed to me. And that's the way I think it should be, air quotes, because that's my thought.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right. I didn't, it's subtle because they do mention the other races, but they don't ever say anything about it beyond that. So I would say that, yeah, that's absolutely right. And I agree with you. I don't think that, because when you start having races, having bonuses and penalties, then it makes it a mechanical decision, not a role play decision. So I think for me, not having that be part of the mechanics is a good thing. So yeah, I agree.
So what was your number 2 thing, sir?
Okay, so this I might be wrong about this. So maybe I like something that doesn't exist. So just as I'm going to have to kind of ask/explain. So strength, it does power your spells. Basically, you can only when you cast a spell you get fatigue. But fatigue is different than damage. It heals faster. So I actually like that because if you look at like Fantasy Trip as I remember it, you take strength damage when you cast a spell, right? But or damage whatever it reduces. But that means it's the same thing as getting stabbed. Where here it doesn't do that. Although I do think in Fantasy Trip, if you go to 0 from a spell, you just pass out, you don't die. But it's similar thing. But I kind of like that. And they have, and again, this is maybe Tunnels and Trolls, right? They have this staff thing that you can make, right? You make this staff that can absorb points of fatigue. So there's like this buffer that magicians can do. And I kind of like that. I like that it's not just your strength goes down. Because if you do it so just your strength goes down, you don't have any other buffer, then you're forced to decide, do I want to increase my IQ so I can cast better spells, or do I want to increase my strength so I can cast more spells, right? So this gives you that buffer so you can kind of have focus on IQ and then do the staff thing. So I guess the wizard staff is what it's called.
Actually it says a staff or a wand. This is all straight out of Tunnels and Trolls.
Yeah.
So in Tunnels and Trolls, it's a staff. In GURPS, it becomes a power stone where the more facets the gem has and the more carat weight it has, the more spell points it can hold. This did not make my list, and that surprises me because this is actually a pet peeve of mine. This is actually something I don't like because the overall effect over long-term play leads to people playing Conan the Mage. I want a more powerful mage, so he has to have more strength. And that is why when I play Tunnels and Trolls, I house rule it so that I use luck instead of strength to power spells.
Right, but I think I agree with you about that. I think this kind of counters that because if you make this staff, the amount of fatigue it absorbs is your IQ.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so basically you can have a high IQ. I mean, you have to put experience points into power the staff, right? To make it, I should say.
Yep.
Then your IQ is what powers the staff. And since the fatigue comes off the staff first, you don't have to have a high strength. So I'm actually agreeing with you.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I read that yesterday, reread that part, and I missed that little interplay in my mind. I didn't draw the connection of, oh, that means you can just, yeah, you can boost your IQ, and that gives you the more spell points by using the staff. Yeah, I didn't make that connection, and I think that's because I'm so blinded by the fact that I hate Conan the Mage.
No, I agree with you, and I think that this overcomes that by
Yeah,
having.
no, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that is what blinded me to seeing this potential in it, and yeah, no, I like it. Good. All right, my number two is that it's only 8 pages long. I love short rule sets. I love short rule sets when they're complete. When they're short and they leave you wanting and leave you saying, "What do I do?" That's a little frustrating. But 5e, Dungeons and Dragons 5e, it's not the fact that you have to spend $150 on the books that keeps me away. It's the fact that it's 1,000 pages of rules that I would have to go through to start playing this game. And okay, so to be fair, probably 300 of those are the monster manual, so you don't want to have to worry about those. And probably half the player's handbook is a spell list. Probably don't need to read every one of those. That's still leaving like 400 pages to go through just to play a game. When I was teenage Joe, I'd be all over that. But cranky old man Joe, that's just not my thing. So 8 pages for a complete playable game, easy to throw out a player, say, here it is, this is what we're playing. They can read the whole thing. I love it. I think it's awesome. I think that it is great.
I agree with you about long games. I don't necessarily agree with this game is complete, but we're in the positives right now, so we'll leave it at that.
So what is your number one positive, sir?
And these are not in the order of what I like. I don't think they're supposed to be right because I think probably.
I tried doing that, and I found that no matter who the guest was, they never did that. So they're just numbered now, 1 through 3.
It's fine. So no, I'm just saying this isn't my favorite thing. Although it is something I like, and it's kind of odd that I like this in a way because I'm going to call it video gamey, but I kind of like it because of the nature of this game, which feels more tactical and a little bit more board gamey / video gamey. Is I like that you gain XP as you play, and you can actually use the XP during the adventure. So it says that you can actually increase your attributes and your skills while you're playing if you have the XP, but you can't gain new skills. So like if I kill a bunch of monsters and I'm in the dungeon or whatever, and I get enough XP, I can raise my strength right there on the spot. And I kind of like that. I think that makes it a little bit more gamey. And for the type of stuff I play with this game, I think that's a good rule. It's different. I wouldn't want it in every game, but I think in this game, because of its structure, I actually like it.
I like it, and I've always felt that's the way it should be. I've always felt like if you're in a dungeon, like in D&D, if you're in a dungeon, you get the XP. I allow level ups right there. I don't require training anyway. I know that. Jason over at the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, he's a big fan of the training rules in AD&D. I have never been. I would agree with this rule right here. I'm going to agree with you. I like it.
Yeah, I think because the game's simple enough, you can do that. Like I feel like if you're in a more complex game, you're not necessarily calculating all your XP as you go. That's why it's more difficult, I think, to do that. But like for instance, when I was running Hyperborea, between sessions, not between with no training, even if they were in the middle of a dungeon, if I gave them the XP and it leveled them up, I would do exactly like you said. I'd let them level up because why not, right?
Right. My number one is the core mechanic. I love games with core mechanics. I know some people don't. I know some people like a whole lot of little mini games. Some people like spinach. I don't get it. I like core mechanics, and I like the simplicity of the skill system. The magic system isn't quite as simple. There's more knobs and levers, I guess, to twist and pull. I still like it though. I like it. That's all I'm going to say. I like it.
I won't say anything about that.
All right.
No, I don't have a problem with core mechanic. It's not my favorite way. If I was developing a game, I would not do that, but it's fine.
All right. And that moves us to the non-positives. Hey, everyone. This is Future Joe. I'm cutting this one off here. The rest will play next week. Feel free to send in feedback, though, for your initial thoughts, and I will have the links for Dark City Games and all that in the show notes for this episode as well. Feedback at decahedron.com. All the other ways in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and until next week, happy gaming, happy life. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Decahedron RPG podcast. Please come back again to the Decahedron RPG podcast.